Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 543. Epilogue 4. The Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. Part 8. As if fulfilling a promise, the companions went on their separate ways to find their purpose. Some set up a security agency, while someone joined the government. Han Suyang didn't join anyone. Instead, she became someone who taught things. Reading modern philosophy through webnovels. Han Suyang did her lectures featuring such a title from the center. After the last scenario ended, reality and fantasy were separated once more. And so, if you apply Roland Barthes' Morning Diary to this novel, most of the attendees carried the look of puzzlement, asking what kind of a dipping croissant in a samjang sauce rubbish this was, but a few students seemed to be rather interested by the idea. One of them raised up his hand and asked her, "Your viewpoint is quite intriguing, Professor. But I do have some objections." Han Suyang nodded her head as consent to go ahead. The student continued on with a triumphant look. Did the author really intend for such a reaction? Is applying such a grandiose theory to a novel full of poor grammar and contradictory sentences a correct way to read it? To be honest, I don't think that's what the author was aiming for. Just from looking at the overabundance of onomatopoeia and mimetic words, it. Han Suyang glanced at the novel she brought along as her teaching material. For sure, it was a work filled with far too many mistakes. The student was carrying a satisfied smile as if he had finally landed a solid body blow to her. She pondered for a little while. She could have just explained to that student, step by step. However, she chose not to do so. She instead began saying these following words. "You're right. Only the author will know the truth. But, if you say that, isn't that too irresponsible? What would it be like if someone starts judging you? Pardon? That someone might notice your not very well washed face, which might be a result of you rushing to get to the lectures on time. Or maybe, they notice your toenails sticking out of your slippers first. And then, they will start thinking like this. Ah, that guy, the way he looks, he must be pretty lazy. And there's no way a lazy person can be smart. So, no need to listen to the opinions of someone like that. What are you even?" Or maybe, that student must have studied the contents of today's lecture throughout last night. You can tell by looking at how enthusiastically he's questioning the professor like that. Sure, his outer appearance is a bit shabby, but he might not care about such things, to begin with. Yes, they could potentially think that way. Han Suyang looked into the student's trembling eyes and continued on. Just like what you said earlier, the author of the novel probably didn't think about stuff like this. However, it is up to you to decide on what you'll get out of reading the novel. If you only find trash within, then it'll simply end as trash. But if it can impart just a tiny little bit of deeper meaning to you, then that alone will improve this work in your eyes. Again, it is up to you to decide which one it will be. But I'd really like you to choose the option where you get to appreciate your time a little bit better. If you don't, enduring my lectures will become a pretty arduous slog for you." The student closed his mouth shut and looked back at Han Suyang. It was unknown whether he understood her or not, however, she thought that there was no helping it even if he couldn't. The student's eyes slowly moved this way and that, then he suddenly said something unexpected. "By the way, Professor? Are you going to write a new novel?" You said this before, didn't you? You're an author because you write. If you don't write, then you're not an author." There was a subtle undertone of "I don't have to listen to someone like you who's no longer an author" in his words. Han Suyang didn't reply for a second or two, her unclear, murky eyes seemed to be peering into the distant space. She then disinterestedly muttered out, "Right. I'm not an author anymore." "Excuse me? I don't have a reader who'll read my work, you see." Before she could finish the rest of her words, though, the clock's bell went off first. Han Suyang grinned and shrugged her shoulders. "All right, then. The novel you need to read for the next class is." She stayed behind on the podium and bade farewell to the students leaving the lecture hall. Her eyes caught a certain text file visible on the screen of the notebook PC currently flipped open. It was a novel she began writing not too long ago as a sort of test. She accessed the file and quietly stared at the sentences she had written so far. It was then she sensed a presence from behind her dot. That was an interesting lecture. It had been nice if that person also attended it, though. Han Suyang quickly turned the screen off and looked back only to discover a familiar face. The intruder was using her elegantly slender fingers to carefully sift through the lecture material scattered around the lecture desk. Ah, this lecture sounds like fun, too. Reading modern fantasy literature starting with Pierre Bourdieu, dissection of romance fantasies with Butler. Did you come here to look down on a web novel author? Yu Sang-ah, slightly tilting her head, smiled brightly. Her smile didn't seem to have changed a bit in the last 2 years. She deeply peered at Han Suyang before asking a question. Why are you wearing glasses all of a sudden? Did your eyesight get worse? None of your business. Aha, I think I understand. You looked too young and your students were ignoring you, right? Han Suyang scowled and angrily yanked the black-rimmed glasses off. Yu Sang-ah teasingly followed that up. Shall we go? Let me buy you a drink. Asterisk. 2 of them walked on the street, one sipping on the iced Americano, while the other, sucking on the peach smoothie. They maintained this awkward distance and focused only on walking forward. Han Suyang asked in passing. How's your work with the government? Is it fun? I'm not doing it for fun, you know. Who promised to come today? Hyansung SSI is currently in the States, so it might be difficult for him, but it looks like Hui 1 SSI will make it. And as you know, Seolwa SSI is. What about the kids? They are coming. They never missed it before, after all. Not too long afterwards, the familiar street of Gwanghwamun greeted them. They entered a side street, walked for a bit longer, and eventually, found the diner they were looking for. Its name was Mark and Selena. Han Suyang unhesitantly pushed the door open. Welcome to. Wow, look who it is. The one welcoming them with fluent Korean was Selena Kim. Mark, expertly spinning pizza dough in the kitchen, whistled loudly. She spoke while guiding them inside. Please wait for a little bit. Your order will arrive very soon. What about the others who arrived before us? Selena Kim pointed to the corner of the bar as if to say, see for yourself. 3 familiar backs of the heads were gathered there. Han Suyang did her best to hold back this certain impatient streak and cautiously sneaked behind the trio. And when she was right behind them, swiftly wielded her hands and pounded on the 3 heads in a row. Ooch? Which dumb asshole? Hey, our dear shorties, you've all grown a lot, haven't you? Ah, Suyang Yoni. Sang-a Yoni. Since this was their first reunion in almost a year, they shared short impressions on how each other looked. And it really didn't take long before their food arrived, too. What did you order, exactly? What's the name of this dish? The Desolate Cabin's Demonic Intestine Stir-Fry. Mark, bringing out the dish, grinned. Han Suyang formed a suspicious expression, before stabbing at the dish shaped like the Korean squid sausage with a fork. What the hell? It tastes great. As expected of its name, the dish was amazing. Her other companions loosened up and began enjoying the food. How long had it been since they got to sit around and enjoy their meal in leisure like this? Even though 2 years had passed since they crossed the world line and returned home, everything still felt like a lie to Han Suyang. Oh. Woo 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 woo, woo. A TV panel installed above the bar was broadcasting scenes from a live concert. A pretty popular idol group was currently performing there. One of them was a monkey, the other was a dragon, and the last one was an archangel. The great sage wielding the mic delivered an impassioned vibrato-filled roar, which was promptly followed up by the shower of colorful spotlights focusing on the rear of the stage as Uriel made her entrance. Yu Sang-ah, elegantly chewing on the intestines, muttered out. They are really popular these days. I joined their fan club yesterday. The Uriel force is seriously. When Lee Ji-hai piped up, Lee Gil-young sent in a quick tackle. I can't bear to look at their performance anymore after seeing the one Dionysus has put on, you know? Especially the dude over there. You mean, Abyssal Black Flame Dragon? What's wrong? Isn't he cute? Shin Yu-sung asked, and Lee Gil-young narrowed his eyes before replying while chewing on his fork. That's cute to you? The panel was now playing the Constellation's new track. Abyssal Black Flame Dragon sporting an eye patch performed a breakdance routine before exploding into a fiery rapid-fire rap monologue. This is the oldest fable. Myth sung by the scenario. One man's evolution, fading with time. What the hell is he even singing about? While the Black Flame Dragon's rapid rap bars continued to land, a couple more people opened the diner's door and entered inside. Their faces seemed a bit flushed as if they had already knocked back a few cold ones somewhere else. They were Jang Haiyang and Zhang Huiwen. What's this? Everyone was here already? Jang Haiyang quickly rushed in and caught Han Soo-young in a headlock. How have you been? Zhang Huiwen lightly high-fived Ju Sang-a's offered hand before shifting her gaze over to the panel to say something. Arg, that rapping is really getting on my nerves. It's good to see everyone after such a long time. Is this everyone for today? Looks that way. Zhang Huiwen began boasting about the new house she recently moved into. Her story generally involved how inconvenient the new place could sometimes be as it was not within the area of train stations, and also how easy it was to get some exercise since a park was nearby, etc. She no longer lived in Gwangwalman. She didn't even live anywhere near the 3rd subway line, too. Han Soo-young asked her. Okay, so. You two still together? Those words caused the companion's attention to gather here. Zhang Huiwen smiled bitterly and shook around her alcohol cup. No, not anymore. How come? If we're together, we get reminded of things. What things? Lee Ji-hai and her sparkling eyes were urging Zhang Huiwen on. However, the latter didn't seem to be in much of a mirthful mood. She simply shook around her drink in silence. Lee Ji-hai eventually closed her wide-open mouth. The panel began playing the prelude to the next song. The Nameless Salvation, Feetball General of Justice, JUS. Han Soo-young listened to the song coming from the panel and murmured something as a follow-up a little bit later. I see. I guess you're right. With that, they stopped chatting altogether. The silence wrapped around their ankles like a quagmire. This was the reason why they didn't meet often. This was the story no one remembered. However, this story definitely did exist. Was 2 years enough time for that time period to become a story? Han Soo-young wanted to know. Still no news about BU? I asked Miss Anna, but she says there hasn't been any communication so far. Before the companions made their way back, BU went to the Dark Stratum to train. Because of that, they hadn't heard any news regarding her whereabouts for the past 2 years. What about Gong Pildu? Probably drinking alone in Chunmuro. Again. I think the shock of separating from his family was too great. That guy, I definitely told him to stay behind in the 1865th turn, so why did he stubbornly come back with us? How about Myongo Ajusi? He's living in the complex, so you must be clued up on his news, right? Han Soo-young? That guy? He's the same as always. What about the Sudi bastard, though? I heard that he tried to get back to the pro gaming scene before quitting recently. No one replied. Jang Haiyang abruptly raised her cocktail glass. I don't know anymore. Let's just get drunk. But, you look pretty drunk already? Don't stop me. I'm gonna go all out today. Me too. Please give me a shot, too. Yu-sung-ah, you're still underage. If you count my age from before the regression, I'm definitely an adult now, you know? While the pouting Shin Yu-sung started pestering the adults, Lee Ji-hai poured herself a stiff shot of soju and without any side snacks, emptied it in one go. Soo-young Yoni, can you write my report for me? Please? She then asked desperately. If you ask me that again, I'ma kill you. 2 years. Around 730 days, if divided daily. Their current conversations could only take place because they had been desperately living their lives during these past 730 days. They went to school, they went to work, they moved house. To get away from that day, one step at a time, the companions tried to live their lives to the fullest. However, someone actually got closer to that day, in order to get away from it. Kim Dokja survived through a story called Ways of Survival. In that case, which story allowed us to survive? Jang Huiwon watched Han Soo-young jotting down something on her memo pad, before asking the latter. What are you busy jotting down there? Just a force of old habit. Are you still writing these days? Her fingers writing down on the memo came to a stop. Yu Sang-ah replied in her stead. I thought you were? Judging from what I saw earlier. Really? What are you writing? Is it a novel? Lee Ji-hai, chewing on a mouthful of newly brought out snacks, quickly asked. Nah, I'm just writing to get back in the groove. Really? Are you planning to publish a new novel? Just as Han Soo-young began pondering how she should reply, she heard a rustling noise coming from her side. Maybe it's in here? Lee Gil-young had left the meal saying he needed to use the John, but even before anyone had noticed it, he was already back and holding Han Soo-young's notebook PC while giggling away. He had prior form of playing computer games on her device without permission, so he naturally knew the password and could log in without any issues. Shin Yu-sung shot him an angry glare, telling him to stop this rude act right now. Lee Gil-young. Arg, what now? His cheeks were flushed red as if he had been sneaking in a couple of sips of the booze. Shin Yu-sung grew nervous and cautiously studied Han Soo-young's moods, but what was going on here? Now normally, the latter would have blown her top by now and smacked the back of Lee Gil-young's head. But now, she was wordlessly sipping on her cocktail. As if, she didn't care if he read it or not. Lee Gil-young took that as a sign of consent, so he quickly opened the file. A short while later, Han Soo-young put her glass down and asked him. Hey, kid. You sure you have the guts to read it? Lee Gil-young's complexion grew paler and paler. Even then, he didn't tear his eyes away from the screen. He continued to read, as if he'd get sucked into the screen at any moment now. Despite furrowing his brows in obvious torment, he continued to read and read. And a few minutes later, he raised his head, tears just about ready to flood out from his eyes. How many chapters have you written so far, Nuna? Not that many. It's about, say, less than 2 books worth. Can I read a bit more? Sure. Realizing that Lee Gil-young's status was somewhat strange, the companions stood up from their chairs. What's going on? What is its content about to make you react like this? I'm also kind of curious, since it's Soo-young SSI's latest work. I'll pass. I'm gonna wait until it comes out as a book. With the exception of Lee Ji-hai saying that while pouring herself another drink, everyone else gathered behind Lee Gil-young. Han Soo-young quietly stared at them. One by one, their gazes were being sucked into the notebook screen. It shouldn't simply be because the story was too entertaining. No, it was that kind of a story, to begin with. Because, this story was. Han Soo-young, you. While listening to Jang Huiwon's trembling voice, Han Soo-young recalled the sentences she had already recorded. Nothing can be changed through regression. It took me a very long time to realize that. That's right. Not a single thing could be changed through the act of regressing. Just like how it was with them back on that day. But, why, such a story? Even if that was true, however, that didn't mean their regression didn't leave anything behind, either. Kim Dokja survived through a story called Ways of Survival. In that case, which story allowed us to survive? Actually, Han Soo-young already knew the answer to that question. It's a story I wanted to show to that idiot. A story still remained for them. A story of a person they all loved. Chapter 544. Epilogue 4. The Omniscient Readers. Viewpoint. Part 9. I just wrote something, hoping to leave it as records of our past. Kim Dokja might wake up someday, you know. When that happens, he'd most likely have forgotten everything about us, anyway. The companions read Han Soo-young's novel. Shin Yu-sung, her eyes reddened from tears, angrily rebuked Lee Gil-young, telling him to slow down with the scrolling, while the boy sniffling away continued to click on the mouse. Yu Sang-ah, Jang Hui-won, and Jang Hyung copied the file and read the novel on their own phones. Yu Sang-ah read the scene where she was making an appearance and smiled faintly. I did say something like that, didn't I? Perhaps she was missing those days, because she stroked the sentences on the phone's display. As if doing that might let her really touch Kim Dokja. Lee Ji-hai, sucking out the last drops from the booze bottle unsteadily, got up from her seat. What the hell? Is it really that fun? Ah? Nuna. Lee Ji-hai, going on a drunken rant, shoved Lee Gil-young off the chair and took over the notebook PC. She then slapped her cheeks and tried to focus her blurry, half-closed eyes on the screen. How long went by like that? Sob, Soob, wah. This novel is too sad, you know? You've only read the first chapter, so what the? Lee Ji-hai blew her nose noisily and chucked the soiled tissue in Lee Gil-young's direction. She remained utterly unperturbed regardless of whether the angry boy was yelling at her or not. Even more so when she scrolled down and read the scene where she made her appearance in Chunmuro, her excitement seemed to reach its peak. A girl wielding a lengthy sword stood in the exit as the faint rays of light shone through. While looking at Lee Ji-hai's hair dancing in the winds intermittently blowing in. Kuyu, I'm so uber cool, aren't I? Arg, seriously now? Go back up already. Despite Lee Gil-young scolding her, Lee Ji-hai continued on yap on. Like, what happens afterwards? What happens to Kim Dokja? In the end, she couldn't win against the booze in her system, and before long, her nose kissed the tabletop. Shin Yu-sung snatched the notebook PC away, and asked a question while taking over the scrolling duty. Do I make an entrance later on, too? Everyone makes their appearance. Although, each person's specific importance will be a bit different, said Han Soo-young. But I really did my best, you know. Yes, I know. Don't worry, your story will show up lots of time later on. They already knew the ending to this story. What would happen to Kim Dokja, and what experiences the companions would go through as the result. How the dream they dreamed crumbled away. They all knew too well. Despite knowing, however, Shin Yu-sung continued to read the story. They strode forward one sentence at a time towards the predetermined end. The story they couldn't change was right here. Shin Yu-sung used every ounce of her energy to read it as if each and every sentence disappearing behind was too lamentable, too sad, to her. How wonderful would it have been if Dokja Jusi was able to read this? Should we go to Hyung and read it for him? Han Soo-young thought about the slumbering Kim Dokja inside Lee Seol-hwa's hospital. This novel was written for that guy, yet she didn't think he'd be reading it anytime soon. Could it be that, just maybe, this was the story's completion? The completed ending of those who had lost something, could that be this novel's true purpose? Could these people be the true readers of this story? Do you think that a Juicy in the Otherworld line will like reading, too? The companions wouldn't be saved with just this measly little story. But at the very least, they should be able to endure their lives while reading and thinking about it. Just like how Kim Dokja reading The Ways of Survival did. I wonder. Maybe. A Juicy is probably a Juicy in that place, too. Definitely. Who knows, he might have ended up as a bug. Keep talking like that if you want to die, Lee Gil-young. I'd have raised him up if he was reborn as an insect, you know? And read books to him every day, too. A couple of adults heard the boy's mindless babble and broke out into chuckles. Yu Sang-ah spoke up next. Regardless of where he's born and what's he born as, Dokja SSI will always be Dokja SSI. Han Soo-young nodded her head. Kim Dokja should be living a new life in a world out there somewhere. Kim Dokja living his life while reading a story written by someone else and feeling happy or sad, or even moved. The people of this world would reminisce about such Kim Dokja's tale and live their lives. praying that Kim Dokja of that world would not be miserable. Praying that he'd get to live in as much happiness as his companions were remembering him in this world. Shin Yusung, repeatedly reading the early parts, spoke up, her voice sounding like a soft sigh. I can't read it anymore, because I'm scared it'll end too soon. It won't end that soon, replied Han Suyang. Are you going to write the next chapter, too? Yeah. It would have been so wonderful if we could send this novel to the other world, too. It's a shame that only we get to read it. The other world? Han Suyang became momentarily dazed at that unexpected idea. She had never even thought about it. It wasn't a possibility to start with, too. She pondered this for a bit longer, but before she could say something, a piece of breaking news came out of the TV screen. Breaking news just in. A terrorist has attacked the Scenario Museum located in Gwanghwamun. Terrorists? In this day and age? Jang Hyang shook her head. Most of the system's influence had already disappeared from this world, so possessing star relics didn't automatically mean you'd be able to do something with them. It was right then that Zhang Huiwen's phone started ringing. Hello, this is Zhang Huiwen, the representative of Iron Caps, the trusted security organization protecting your... Excuse me? Where? Who showed up? The clearly flustered Zhang Huiwen raised her head and looked at the TV panel. The news broadcast's ticker tape continued to move along. Identity of the terrorist is now known to be a transcender formerly known as the Conquering King. The Conquering King? A short while later, the terrorist's face showed up on the screen. The terrorist, Conquering King Yu Young Hyok. 33, unemployed. Asterisk. Stop him. The riot police arriving on the scene blocked off the museum's access and stood before the approaching man. However, he used fleet-footed movements to evade their truncheons. The jet-black coat danced in the air as the man's hands went to work, and the riot police rushing in were scattered away like the breaking waves. Yuwak. He's using the system's powers. Hurry up and call the security company. And get the government-affiliated constellations, to dash. Yu Young Hyok's Red Phoenix Shuanpa spat out reddish-yellow licks of flames as he dashed forward. Each step taken emitted truly stupendous heatwave, and the members of riot police had to back away in fear. Before long, he had reached the front of the Scenario Museum's doorstep. The place where star relics from the Age of Apocalypse were stored. This was where the important artifacts not open to public had been gathered. The riot police chasing after Yu Young Hyok shouted out. He's just a transcender from the old generation. The battle array formation, the constellation names of the North Stars worked together to create near the museum will. North Star 5 March formation has been triggered. Yu Young Hyok analyzed the inner workings of the array formation blocking him. It was a Murim-style battle array formation that followed the laws of the North Star and 5 elements of the universe to create a remarkable unison of the Life Gate and Death Gate. His eyes emitted golden rays of light as his dark heavenly demon sword accurately stabbed into 7 separate points. Kurururung. Crazy son of a... How could he? These young riot police members who didn't know much about the Age of Apocalypse could only look on with their jaws hitting the floor. Even they had heard of the stories, of course. 20 years ago, a man who dared to stare arrogantly at the stars of the heavens existed. It was only a story to them, however. A man who could evenly match up to the constellations? They believed that no such man could have ever existed. Too bad for them, the living proof was now standing before their eyes. Yu Young Hyok stepped within the crumbling array formation. No one could stop him now. It was also then someone appeared among the rising dust clouds. Conquering King, what do you think you're doing? Surely, someone like you don't have a reason to steal items such as the star relics? It was Han Dong-hoon, an incarnation affiliated with the government. He was famed for sending messages to the opposition's eyes rather than addressing them directly. Yu Young Hyok quietly stared at the message, before pointing at the steeple of the museum. A small ship hung up there like some kind of a symbol. I need that ship. That's just a replica. It can't even fly. We'll see once I activate it. I know that you've been roaming the world without reporting periodically to the world government. Despite knowing that, the world government decided to turn a blind eye. Because they respect your achievements from the age of apocalypse. However, that ends today. If you insist on behaving like this, then we won't have any choice but to use force. Almost at the same time as those words arrived, powerful fighting spirit exploded out from Han Dong-hoon's entire body. He, too, was a survivor from the era of scenarios, a powerful figure who came to be known as the King of Shadows by the time scenarios were drawing to a close. You wish to stop me? Yu Young-hyuk took a single step forward. At the same time, humans of the surroundings knelt down simultaneously. Han Dong-hoon's expression stiffened, and he quickly performed hand signs. All personnel, get ready to. Even before the message could be finished, shadows hiding on the museum's rooftop began falling like dead cicadas. Tumble, drop. The fallen agents writhed around like worms. Traces of their pressure points being depressed could be seen throughout their bodies. Surprisingly, over 30 incarnations were dispatched to this place together with Han Dong-hoon, yet all these elite warriors were taken care of even before anyone had noticed it. Get out of my way. Han Dong-hoon's shoulders trembled imperceptibly. For the past 20 years after the scenarios ended, the strongest incarnation he knew of was the Prophet Anna Croft, the only surviving incarnation that could compare to the constellations. However, even if she came, could she stop this monster? Han Dong-hoon, respond. Han Dong-hoon? If he didn't escape from here, he'd get killed. Han Dong-hoon knew this, yet he couldn't even lift his feet. An incredible amount of killing intent had tightened around him like a noose. Just who would be able to stop this transcender? The Murim world's transcenders residing on another planet? Or, constellations currently on a world tour? No, even they might find it too much. The monster before his eyes was an existence that had reached the highest realm even among the transcenders. Post-destruction of Starstream, constellations could no longer exercise the power levels of their past selves. That's why. Captain Han Dong-hoon. Evade it. Yu Young-hyuk's sword moving, and Han Dong-hoon squeezing his eyes shut, as well as an ear-splitting noise exploding, all happened at the same time. Scary waves of magical force shoved Han Dong-hoon's body away. It had been really long time since he last saw a clash heavy enough to cause the storm of probabilities aftermath. Su-chu-chu-chu-chu. He held onto the crack on the ground and endured the storm of aftermath, only to be greeted by an unbelievable spectacle. F***ck, man. Trying to use my powers in such a long time is killing me. Someone was blocking the conquering king's sword. Constellation, architect of the false last act, is unleashing her power. Fable fragments of the Bureau is supporting the architect of the false last act. She was one of only a handful of the truly strong who could stop that monster, Yu Young-hyuk. The purple-hued magical energy oozing out from her entire figure was dyeing the surroundings in a foreboding manner. Yu Young-hyuk, what kind of stupidity is this, said the Empress of Black Flames, Han Soo-young. This isn't a matter you should concern yourself with. Why shouldn't I? Our former regressor friend suddenly decided to become a terrorist for free, so how can I not? The comrade of the past has lost his way and became corrupted, so it's the duty of the superhero to take up on the responsibility of Rehabi. Kwaboom. God damn it, what gives? Why are you going mental here, man? Get out of the way. I don't plan to exchange sophistries with you. No, you better start talking. That's always been your damn problem. You've been behaving nicely for the past 2 years, so why the hell? Swee-ish dash. She pulled out a dagger from her inner pocket, gritted her teeth, and defended against Yu Young-hyuk's attack. The overabundant bombardment of the sword energy began forcing her body back bit by bit. Han Soo-young glanced in the direction she was being pushed back. The Scenario Museum. No matter how hard she thought about it, it made no sense. Yu Young-hyuk had no reason to target that place. He wouldn't get any stronger than he already was by possessing a couple more star relics at this point. Besides, a star relic someone like him might find desirable wouldn't even be in this PLA. It was then, her eyes caught the sight of a certain something. "Hey, you. It can't be." Her hair strands slowly began floating up. Creeping, ominous waves of energy spread out everywhere. Cold rage was filling up Han Soo-young's voice. "Is it because of that?" Yu Young-hyuk's eyes were seething, and his irises were reflecting the hull of the replica, final arc, located on top of the steeple. Chapter 544. Epilogue 4. The Omniscient Readers. Viewpoint. Part 9. Han Soo-young yelled out. "You stupid bastard! Did you forget already? This world line's arc has already dashed." Yu Young-hyuk's sword thrust dug into her opening. The moment she gasped out, her dagger was already flying away. Blood spluttered from the cut wound. His sword was now pointing straight at her neck. "Young-hyuk SSI. Please stop." Hold on, master. Are you mad? What's gotten into you?" The companions arriving belatedly approached them to stop the fighting. However, Yu Young-hyuk didn't even look behind at them as he swung his sword. The gobsmacking level of magical energy wave shot out from the dark heavenly demon sword, and drew a line of roiling flames one step in front of the companions. "No one crosses that line. If you do, I will cut Y, smack." Han Soo-young's left foot rising up in the blink of an eye accurately kicked his wrist. The dark heavenly demon sword, gripped in his hand, flung away, drew circles in the air, before stabbing into the ground. Han Soo-young growled at him. "Yu Young-hyuk. I'm sure you already know this, but I really hate to see a rotten apple spoiling the whole barrel. You know, I was feeling pretty good up until a few minutes ago. Specifically, before you started doing this crap, that is. I guess the peace of the past 2 years have been too sweet for me, seeing how I've completely forgotten about what kind of a bastard you are." It was hard to tell just who her boiling rage was directed at. Han Soo-young recalled the faces of her companions reading her novel. The faces that grew at ease as they read the story. The companions, everyone else, even herself. They were about to feel brave enough to finally take that one step forward, away from that day. Yet, Han Soo-young stopped both Zhang Huiwen and Yu Sang-ah about to cross the burning line. "You two, stay back. Looks like today is finally the day I pound some sense into the sky." As soon as those words ended, both the figures of Han Soo-young and Yu Young-hyuk vanished. The place they met again was in the air dozens of meters off the ground. The thunderclap-like explosions rang out and their fists collided against one another. "Ruimbul, Kururarung." The blade of Han Soo-young's hand slammed hard into Yu Young-hyuk's waist, while his right kick landed on her solar plexus. The exchange of attacks and defenses that even Constellation's eyesights found hard to keep up continued on. Blood trickled down her lips, while large, bloody bruises formed on his arms raised up to guard him. Ji-hai, watching the fight unfold, couldn't hold back and reached for her own sword. It was Yu Sang-ah who stopped her. "Yoni? But why? Let them be for the time being." Perhaps she had predicted something, because while stopping the companions, she spread out her lotus pedestals, as well. She was planning to protect the civilians from the storm of aftermath soon to visit them. Right next second, the atmosphere up in the sky began to change. Great Fable, torch that swallowed the myth, has started its stammered attempt at storytelling. Great Fable, liberator of the forgotten ones, is waking up from the darkness. The clash of these two managed to awaken the old fables. Han Soo-young summoned all of her strength to break through Yu Young-hyuk's fist and shouted out. "Speak up. Why today, of all days? Why have you been staying quiet for the last 2 years only to start this crap today? None of your business." Aha, is that so? She didn't plan on going this far. However, looking at the expressionless face of Yu Young-hyuk acting like a damn stubborn mule, she simply couldn't rein in her boiling anger anymore. "I always hated you. And regretted it, too. Why did I write the story of someone like you with my own hands?" She'd never have said these words in any other times. Even then, she continued to spit out everything anyway. "I cursed my other self. If this story didn't exist, none of these things would have happened. No one would have died. And Kim Dokja might have. Yu Young-hyuk's fist finding that brief window of opening cut her words short. He kept his mouth resolutely shut and continued to fight. Though she hadn't heard a proper answer yet, Han Soo-young knew why he was trying to get a hold of the final arc. We already failed. Since we came home with our tails between our legs, you should have quietly accepted it and moved on. Have you really forgotten everything the fourth wall said to us? She knew the truth, and that was why she just couldn't stand it anymore. You shouldn't have been greedy. No, YOUSHLDVEBN con TENTYTH 49% Kim Dokja. The fourth wall's voice from that day, the one she had never forgotten until now. Yu Young-hyuk finally opened his mouth. Spoken like a true loser. You simply gave up, that's all. Every time their fists collided, the worn-out fables scattered in the air. The fragments emitting faint rays of light settled down on his cheeks. It was only then did she spot his messed-up appearance. The unkempt, stiffened hair, and his rather unsightly-looking unwashed face. Han Soo-young sucked in her breath and took a step back in that instant. Some memories brushed past her head just then, Yumiya, showing up one day while crying her eyes out and saying that her appa had just disappeared, and Yu Young-hyuk, walking away from the pro-gamer job he barely managed to earn back, and vanishing into thin air. Should I have started off with how he had been doing all this time? Golden aura was focusing on his right hand. That was the beginning of the breaking the sky force punch. He was being deadly serious here. Han Soo-young hurriedly unfurled her right hand. Stigma, character summon, is activating. At the bare minimum, if she used this skill to fling him far away, then applicable individual is no longer a character. She belatedly realized it, the Yu Young-hyuk standing before her eyes was not the character from the Ways of Survival she had written. After Kim Dokja's final act had arrived, and after the Ways of Survival story came to an end, Yu Young-hyuk had completely broken free of the position of the character. A punch wrapped in pure golden light scythed the air and flew in. She activated every single evasion skill she could. The attack brushed past her shoulder with the thinnest margin imaginable. The storm of aftermath from that improbably powerful punch pricked her painfully. Yu Young-hyuk muttered out. Your skills have barely lost any of their original powers. Is this due to the system's grace? The only reason why Han Soo-young's skills could still exhibit such power was because she received the Bureau's fable from the 1865th turns by Hyung. Yu Young-hyuk asked her with an emotionless voice. This world no longer needs the system. Yet, why did you receive that fable from him? Obviously to maintain Kim Dokja's life. They went through with the group regression, because Kim Dokja's avatar was increasingly getting weaker. And she received the Bureau's fable just in case something similar happens to Kim Dokja. Why did you do something like that? You should know this. That fool cannot wake up again, said Yu Young-hyuk. Kim Dokja isn't dead. Why dash? If you really believe that, then why are you stopping me? For a moment there, she became speechless. Yu Young-hyuk then flashed right behind her, and slammed down on her back. Han Soo-young crash-landed on the ground. She coughed out thick dust and stood back up, then shouted at him while tottering unsteadily. Yu Young-hyuk, wake the hell up. You think this is what Kim Dokja really wants? He told you, didn't he? He told you not to abandon this world. And you also agreed. That's right. I agreed not to regress. Don't make me laugh. You can't regress anymore, that's what. If you still could do it, you'd probably have gone back. I may have. Yu Young-hyuk's golden eye began to glow brightly within the thick dust cloud. And that eye was now questioning Han Soo-young. Are you any different? She couldn't answer back. But in her stead, Kim Dokja's fable still remaining within her grasp replied. Fable, one who opposes miracles, is lamenting in sorrow. These were words that she just couldn't let go. She wrote them down somewhere sometimes to endure her life. Telling herself not to regress, to live in the present. She continued to reflect on those obvious-sounding words of the past, and continued to endure moment by every moment. That was her past 2 years. It seems that you two couldn't forget anything. Shut up. Han Suyang dashed forward in an instant and punched him squarely in the face. Every time their fists flew out, the fables they shared and compiled together writhed violently. Fable, King of Coincidental, is being agitated. She believed that she worked hard to endure. She believed that a lot of time had passed by now, as much as all the sentences she had written down. She breathed, she ate, and she slumbered. Han Suyang survived in that manner. You are not a regressor because you regress. However, could she really say she had been living a life that way? Some people would live their entire lives inside the already ended past. Every time bones in her fists were crushed, fables scattered away little by little, fables, the raw memories preserved as was without any revisions. Han Suyang reflexively began retrieving these scattering fables. She didn't want to let go of any one of them. She didn't want to forget about a single thing. For the past 2 years, she hadn't been able to take a single step forward. Han Suyang panted breathlessly and spoke up. What do you think will change if you do this now? Even if you leave, you won't find Kim Dokja. And you can't even go anywhere. Besides, this world line's arc is already destroyed. Did you forget what happened back during the final battle? That isn't an arc. And we can't leave this world line even if we wanted to. The powers of the two people collided once more. Accompanied by the loud "ku-du-du-du" noise, the storm was generated from their magical energy. Yu Yunghyak, standing in the center of the storm, then replied. I've compiled so many fables up until now, but I still do not know what my is. The vigorous, ferocious fable exploded within the air. He didn't pay any heed to the precious fables being damaged and simply swung his fists. You wrote my story. In that case, you should also know where my story is supposed to end. At that moment, sentences began streaming past Han Suyang's head. Did Yu Yunghyak really come here to acquire the final arc? The belated realization flooded in. The regressor, weary of the scenarios, could only carry on because the scenarios existed. Yu Yunghyak then began gathering all of his remaining fables. All these fables belonging to a man who had finally escaped from the curse of regression bared their collective fangs at Han Suyang. Hit me with everything you've got, Han Suyang. This was Yu Yunghak's last stand. Every cell in her body was ringing alarm bells. The regressor who had repeated lengthy lifetimes. A certain emotion floated upon those eyes that had been described dozens, hundreds of times before. Han Suyang knew very well what that emotion was. Yu Yunghyak wished to die in this place. Not by the hands of anyone, but by the existence who had written his very first sentence. Screw you. You've never, ever done what I wanted from you, so what the hell? Quiet dash. Yu Yunghyak, unleashing all of his might, swung his fist again, one attack that focused all of his great fables. The climax of the fight was about to be reached. Han Suyang too unleashed all of her fables. And then, an explosion akin to a star blowing up rocked the world. Everything hurt as if her entire body had been pounded on. Every bone in her right fist thrust forward was broken. Her companions cried out, while other spectators screamed. Han Suyang endured the force of impact while stuck in this ringing pain harsh enough to tear out her eardrums. Her whole body was now left in tatters. Yu Yunghyak was collapsed on the ground, unmoving. Her heart began pounding away. Yu Yunghyak? The tips of his hand trembled ever so faintly. He slowly opened his eyes and looked up at her. She panted heavily and barely managed to force out some words. This is a little different from back then in the dark castle, right? The moment she finished saying that, both of her legs gave way. When did she get hit? All the bones in her knees had been completely crushed. Doesn't look that way, muttered Yu Yunghyak. You son of a... Two of them collapsed face first into the ground. Han Suyang crawled towards Yu Yunghyak. Her anger didn't seem like it'd abate soon unless she smacked him just one more time, somehow. Her hand shaking precariously was about to slap him in the back of his head, but unfortunately, his own right hand shaking pitifully grabbed onto her wrist first. And so, the arms of two people started a contest of what little strengths they had left in midair, only for them miss each other and sag down weakly. They truly had not one drop of energy left to continue. The torn scars left behind in the skies by the collision of their fables could be seen. And the view of the distant star stream could be spied within the horribly torn sky. The few remaining stars of the night sky sparkled and sent their faint rays of light on the two people. Yu Young-hyuk staring at that spectacle for a long while spoke in passing. Kim Dokja is supposed to be scattered to the rest of the universe. Kim Dokja's soul, scattered away into fine little pieces. How much of him truly remained within those tiny fragments? Even Han Soo-young couldn't be sure. Except that, she was sure of the tiny Kim Dokja being born as some things in the mouths of the world she hadn't even thought of. He might be reborn as a human. Maybe the place was similar to Earth. Maybe this time, he'd be born in another continent, not in the Korean peninsula. Do you think that fool has become happier now? The moment she heard him, Han Soo-young felt that something had finally come to an end. The mouth of her heart ached really painfully. She could clearly hear the sounds of something breaking, the sounds of a story coming to an end. The sounds of their truly long mourning finally drawing to a close. That was the sound of someone only living in their past finally letting go of that very past. Right at that moment, Han Soo-young was overcome by the bizarre guilt of corruption, of betrayal. Kim Dokja, he. Was it possible that he didn't want us to give up? Could it be that even if everyone else let go of their long, agonizing sorrow, he wished for just one person to continue on with the acts of sheer stupidity at the cost of ruining their life? She heard Yu Young-hyuk coughing away painfully and muttered out what she needed to say. I'm sure he's doing well. He's a tough guy, after all. He's probably living a life of his own out there, and living it happily, too. Who knows, he might be reading some other weird book in the meantime, too. Even if we find him, the fool probably won't remember anything. This was the end of their mourning. There was no meaning in crossing the world line anymore. Even if they did find that Kim Dokja, what could they possibly do? They couldn't certainly impose the past on someone who didn't remember. The reincarnated Kim Dokja wasn't the Kim Dokja. The one they knew no longer existed in this universe, no matter where they looked. Even then, Han Soo-young still blurted out something strange. We don't know that. If the ways of survival also exists in the place where he's reincarnated into, then... Right away, she felt puzzled by why she said something like that. As I said, the ways of survival. Her mouth continued to mutter out, perhaps to reject her own will. Kim Dokja, the most ancient dream, has been scattered throughout the universe. Her mind began spitting out disorienting sentences one after the other. This universe is maintained by the imagination of the most ancient dream. In that case, what is the most ancient dream dreaming about right now? Creeping goosebumps crawled up her arms. She didn't even want to think about it, yet. A juicy from another world line probably likes books, too. Right? This was truly a nonsensical delusion. Even then, despite knowing that, Han Soo-young couldn't stop her thought process. Kim Dokja, reading someone's novel while carrying an expression she couldn't imagine on the other side of the distant universe. That guy, he. Is he still curious about the conclusion to this story, I wonder? Han Soo-young asked. What are you talking about? What if? What if the countless Kim Dokja scattered to the rest of universe read a certain story all at the same time? Why did constellations try to spread their own fables as far and as wide as possible? How come the foundation of this world was stories? What if all those Kim Dokjas who had forgotten that he is the most ancient dream, dreams of the same story? The way to rediscover Kim Dokja, without ruining the lives of the reincarnated Kim Dokjas living in other world lines. Han Soo-young's hazy, indistinct-sounding voice continued on. What if the story he's dreaming of is the same as the story we all wish for? Her chain of thought was broken only after a pitch-black shadow was cast over her head. This area was earmarked to be renovated as a public park, But thanks to you too, it's complete chaos here. Since when was it? Anna Croft was standing there. Are you planning to cross the world line again? Han Suyang belatedly regained her wits after seeing that woman's face. She then remembered the delusion she'd been cooking up just now and felt ashamed by it. From the get-go, that idea was nonsense. To make Kim Dokjaz of other world lines dream of the novel she had written. What a crazy and empty talk that was. More importantly, there was no way to cross to other world lines in this world, anyway. But then, Anna Croft's expression was somewhat strange. I thought that a day like this might come sooner or later. Her eye was emitting the crimson glow. Her gaze was now directed at the steeple of the museum. At the replica of the final arc. Han Suyang's heart began beating faster and faster. Such a thing was not possible. It shouldn't be possible, but... how? Kugugugu. Slowly, so very slowly, the so-called replica began floating up from the top of the museum. Yu Yonghyuk, and his brows shot up high, was already sitting up as he stared at the airborne object. The ark, its size might have been very small, but without a doubt, it was still an ark. I collected some parts and had it fixed for the past 20 years, just in case. If none of you had returned, then I was planning to go and visit you. Although not many parts could be salvaged and the vessel has not been repaired completely. The ark slowly floating up opened like a capsule and revealed its interior. This was a very small, final ark, where only one person could barely fit inside. It can be used. Except, only one person can ride it.